Hey, hi, hello there, and welcome back to Formula Amateur, where today we are discussing a brief history of Alpine and their various iterations. They started off as Benetton, then they became Renault, then they became Lotus, then they became Renault again, and now they're Alpine, and all their ups and downs and all their drivers and their team principals. We're discussing all of that, so let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. So the team started off as a Tollman in 1926 to deliver Ford cars to dealerships around the UK. And Tollman Motorsport was in Formula One in 1981 until 1985. But this was right after the person who set the team up, Tollman himself, he died in a racing accident in 1976, so he never actually saw his cars take part in Formula One. So the team principal during that entire time was Alex Hawkridge, and they had, during their time in 1981, their drivers were Brian Henton and Derek Warwick. In 1982, Derek Warwick and Theo Fabi. In 1983, Derek Warwick and Bruno Giacomelli. And in 1984, they had Ayrton Senna, Stefan Johansson, Johnny Lacotto, and Pierluigi Martini. And in their final year in 1985, they had Theo Fabi and Piercarlo Ghinzani. And after that, they were bought out by the Benetton family, who bought Tollman Motorsport, and the team became Benetton Formula. So let's get into the Benetton days and the drivers that they had during that time. So let's get into the Benetton days. So when they started in 1986, they were first called Benetton BMW Team, and their drivers were Theo Fabi and Gerhard Berger. In 87, they were named Benetton Formula, and they had Theo Fabi again and Thierry Boutsen. In 88, they had Alessandro Nannini and Thierry Boutsen. In 1989, they had Alessandro Nannini, Johnny Herbert, and Emmanuel Pirro. In 1990, they had Alessandro Nannini, Robert Moreno, and Nelson Piquet. In 91, they were called Camel Benetton Ford, and they had Roberto Moreno, Michael Schumacher, and Nelson Piquet. In 1992, they had Michael Schumacher and Martin Brundle. In 93, they had Michael Schumacher and Riccardo Patrese. In 1994, they were named Mild 7 Benetton Ford, and they had Michael Schumacher, JJ Leto, Jos Verstappen, and Johnny Herbert. In 95, they were called Mild 7 Benetton Renault, and they had Michael Schumacher and Johnny Herbert. In 96, they had Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger. In 97, they had Jean Alesi, Gerhard Berger, and Alexander Verse. In 98, they were called Mild 7 Benetton Playlife, and they had Giancarlo Fisichella and Alexander Verse. In 99, they had Giancarlo Fisichella and Alexander Verse again. In 2000, they also had Giancarlo Fisichella and Alexander Verse. And in 2001, when they were called Mild 7 Benetton Renault Sport, they had Giancarlo Fisichella and Jenson Button. And now let's talk about the team principals during that time, shall we? So the team principals of Benetton from 1985 to 1987, it was Peter Collins. In 1998 and 1999, Alessandro Benetton, who was the chair of the company. Between 1990 and 1997, they also had Flavio Briatore being the team principal. In 1998 to 2000, they had Rocco Benetton, and from 2000 to 2001, once again, they had Flavio Briatore. Following on from this, in the year 2000, the team was actually bought out by Renault F1 team, but they didn't change their name to Renault for 2 years. So in 2002, that's when they started to call themselves Renault for the first time, but it's not the first time that a Renault team has been on the grid, as Renault has been a constructor in numerous variations since 1977 until 1985, and then Renault was also a engine supplier for many teams, and then Benetton formula changed to Renault in 2002 officially. So let's move on to the Renault days. Okay, so let's talk about the first stint of the team being Renault. So from 2002, their drivers were Jarno Trulli and Jenson Button. In 2003, it was Jarno Trulli and Fernando Alonso. In 2004, it was Jarno Trulli, Jacques Villeneuve and Fernando Alonso. In 2005, it was Fernando Alonso and Giancarlo Fisichella. In 2006, it was Fernando Alonso and Giancarlo Fisichella again. In 2007, it was Giancarlo Fisichella and Heikki Kovalainen. In 2008, it was Fernando Alonso and Nelson Piquet Jr. In 2009, it was Fernando Alonso, Nelson Piquet Jr. and Romain Grosjean. In 2010, it was Robert Kubica and Vitaly Petrov. And in 2011, it was Nick Heidfeld, Bruno Senna and Vitaly Petrov. So let's get on to the team principals during that time. So during this time as Renault for the first time, they only had 2 team principals, and that was Flavio Briatore from 2002 to 2009 until he had been given a lifetime ban from ever returning to the sports due to the Crashgate scandal, where they tried to purposely get Nelson Piquet Jr. to crash in order to help Fernando Alonso win another championship or win another race. He was given a lifetime ban, which was later lifted, and now he's in the sport again. Spoilers. And then in 2010 and 2011, it was Eric Boulier who was the team principal. So now we go into the next era of the team, Lotus. Lotus joined Renault in 2011 as the Lotus Renault GP team before completely renaming themselves to the Lotus F1 team in 2012. Lotus has previously been an F1 team between 1958 and 1994, but this is about the time that they took over Renault and that whole story, rather than them individually being Lotus beforehand. So in 2012, they were called Lotus F1 team, and they had Kimi Raikkonen, Romain Grosjean and Jerome D'Ambrosio. And then in 2013 they had Kimi Raikkonen, Heikki Kovalainen and Romain Grosjean. In 2014 they had Romain Grosjean and Pastor Maldonado, and in 2015 they had Romain Grosjean and Pastor Maldonado. Then Renault purchased the team back from Lotus in December 2015, but we have yet to discuss the team principals of the short-lived Lotus team. So during their time as the Lotus team, they had 3 team principals. So from 2010 to 2011, when they were partly Lotus, partly Renault, they had Tony Fernandez alongside Eric Buehler, who was doing the team stuff, the team principal stuff, and then Eric Buehler was the official team principal from 2012 to 2013, and then they had Gerard Lopez from 2014 to 2015. So now we go on to the second round of Renault. So when Renault came back to Formula 1 as the Renault team, they were known as Renault Sport F1 team, and in 2016 when they got on the grid, they had Kevin Magnussen and Jolyon Palmer. In 2017 they had Nico Hülkenberg, Jolyon Palmer and Carlos Sainz Jr., and then in 2018 they had Nico Hülkenberg and Carlos Sainz Jr., and in 2019 they were known as Renault F1 team, and they had Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hülkenberg. In 2020 they were known as Renault DP World F1 team, and they had Daniel Ricciardo and Esteban Ocon. And let's talk about the team principal situation during the second round of the Renault days. So during the time of this Renault being a team again, they had 2 team principals. One which was Fred Vasseur, who was there was only there manager in 2016 and left in January 2017 due to disagreements between him and Cyril Abiteboul, who later then became team principal from 2017 to 2020 until Renault decided to change into Alpine, although Alpine is it's a different branch of Renault. It's their sort of more sports brand of car. They decided that that side of them needs to be promoted more, which is why they changed their name to Alpine. And now we'll be discussing the current team, which is Alpine F1 team, BWT Alpine F1 team. So let's talk about Alpine. So Alpine came into the grid, they came onto the grid in 2021 to promote their car brand while maintaining its association with the Renault group. And when they first came onto the scene, this was in 2021, and they had Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon, and they were known as Alpine F1 team. In 2022, they were known as BWT Alpine F1 team and have been known as that since, and that was when they also had Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon. But in 2023 this changed, where they had an all-French team for an all-French company, Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. In 2024 it was Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon and Jack Doohan. Jack Doohan took part in the final race in Abu Dhabi because of the issue which occurred where Esteban Ocon was already signed to Haas and wanted to do the testing for Haas during the post-season testing, but Alpine did not want to do that because he is still technically under their contract. So the only way to get out of that situation was for Ocon and Alpine to agree to end their contracts early, and him not taking part in the final race of 2024 in Abu Dhabi, and letting Jack Doohan take his seat then, so that he is free to do the postseason testing for Haas. So now in 2025 we also had 3 drivers, as Jack Doohan was unfortunately eventually replaced, unfortunately for him. Debatable whether it was unfortunate for the team itself, because his replacement was Franco Colapinto, who is about on par with Jack Doohan in terms of results, and Pierre Gasly is still there. So now let's talk about the team principals, and oh boy, have there been many team principals for this team. So in the time that they have been a team, Alpine have had many team principals. So their first one was Davide Brivio in 2021, but that was short-lived, and then Marcin Budkowski came in, and he was there from 2021 to 2022. He is now a presenter on Viaplay PL, where he is a commentator during the races, or a pundit or a presenter, one of those. I'm not subscribed to it, I'm afraid. Then they had Otmar Safnauer, who was there from 2022 to 2023 until he was fired due to potentially the handling of Oscar Piastri's contract, where he ended up leaving Alpine as their reserve driver to drive for McLaren, due to not being satisfied with the team and their opportunities for him. Then they had Bruno Famin from 2023 to halfway through 2024, when he went to the main Renault section in France, the factory there, and he is looking after other things motorsport related there. And then Oliver Oakes took his role in the team from halfway through 2024 to halfway through 2025, and ever since then we had a de facto team principal of Flavio Briatore. Once again, as I said, he made a comeback, and he has been a de facto team principal because he's technically not the team principal. He is not allowed to be, because he is hired in a different way to the way that team principals are hired, so therefore he's sort of like an external hire that doesn't qualify him to be a team principal, and probably for the best that he does not become a team principal because that might not look good for the branding due to the history he has with the team when he was team principal. But that's just my thinking there. So while they are looking for a replacement for Oliver Oakes, who went back to being the head of high-tech TGR team in F2 and F3, Flavio is doing what he remembers about being a team principal. But in 2026, Alpine are ending their Formula One association with Renault and will become a Mercedes customer, as Mercedes will supply their engine to them. This also means that there will still be 4 teams with a Mercedes engine, but this time it will be Mercedes themselves, of course. Then there'll be McLaren, Alpine, who will be the latest to the list, and Williams, because the Aston Martin team are becoming a Honda customer and Red Bull are becoming a Ford customer. But also apparently it's a blend of them and Red Bull, so it's a hybrid sort of situation in terms of branding. So that is all for the Alpine brief history. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Formula Amateur. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to check out our lovely colleagues on the Be the Change Media Network. Don't forget to check out the website, BeTheChangeMediaNetwork.com. Don't forget to check out our socials, which are linked in the description. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your week. We are back next week with another brief history of, this time we'll be talking about Aston Martin. And then we are having a race rundown, because after this week, well, after the next Saturday's episode, it's the race weekend, so we're kicking things off in the Netherlands. See you there. Goodbye.